Kom ons kom by die mediums wat jy gebruik. En kyk, nog nooit het ek iemand so veelsidig soos jy gesien nie. En nie net dit nie, jy werk met goed wat baie min mense al mee gewerk het. Ons het nou gister gesels oor die as van die boeke wat jy verbrand het waarmee jy gewerk het. Jy het ook al met waterstains, dis onder andere een van die werke wat die SAIK aangekoop het. Vertel gou vinnig die medium wat jy daar gebruik het en die tegniek wat jy gebruik het.
It would be great to say it was a great intellectual find, but my old studio in Halfway House in Midrand, the roof leaked really badly. And you do spend a number of hours lying on your back looking at a drawing thinking, God, this thing's terrible. And then looking at the stains in the roof thinking, damn, there's so much more exciting than my drawing. And started experimenting with the idea of staining and the stains that our society leaves. So the link would have come through that. The fact that we stain our lives, we stain other people's lives. And just experimenting literally with damaged paper. And it was based totally and utterly on staring on the stains on the roof of my studio and then making again just a verbal link. The stains of the father live on through the son. That the actions that we do now, the violence that one part of society perpetuated in another, it's hereditary, it transfers, it goes on, and that's where the stains came from. And then I experimented with different solvents that I could use as well. Not great for the paper, but solvents run faster than water. So experimenting with thinners and terps and things like that. Much of my life deals with experimenting and playing. I think that comes from being a printmaker, more so than just doing drawing. Because printmaking is really about finding solutions to technical problems. And often it's 3 o'clock in the morning and it's like, how am I going to make this work? And you just throw something at it to see what happens. It's a far more experimental process than drawing. The two processes feed off each other. I couldn't work solely in print and I couldn't work solely in drawing. I think they're very necessary. So it's just a playfulness. I mean, even a medium like the smoke drawings, which I'm also worked with for a number of years, that wasn't that playful. I was in a very tight situation of having to come up with a solution. But it was just taking something and saying, I wonder what will happen if I do this. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. I have piles of, I have these burning sessions. I take them home and I give them a sort of ritual sending to the heavens. But you just look at stuff and you think, oh, this is an interesting bit of rust that's grown on the paper because I've left it in the press too long. Maybe I can draw the rust. Maybe. So it's just looking at things and often just playing with the medium, and then afterwards by a rather slow, because my brain is not that fast, kind of realization. Oh, but the smoke drawings, because you can't fix them, are incredibly vulnerable. They're totally fragile. If you touch them, you destroy them. And again, how that parallels people's lives. Society is so fragile. Children's lives are so vulnerable. They're touched by an aspect and the damage perpetuates.
Kom ons praat gou oor die rookwerk wat jy gedoen het, want dit is 'n baie interessante tegniek. Ek weet nie veel mense weet dit nie, maar vertel gou hoe jy dit gedoen het.
Well, you draw upside down. You work with a candle and you work fairly fast. So it's just basically, and there's a couple of videos on YouTube if anyone wants to have a look. You just draw with a lighted candle. The paper's got to be suspended above your head. And then because you're drawing through the flame, you can't really see what you're doing. So you're kind of just drawing freehand. And it is also muscle memory. You learn that if you move your hand a certain way, you get a kind of certain mark. And it's also a way of inventing different processes, different candles, different types of candles, depending on the number of, the percentage of, paraffin, give you a different kind of smoke. The length of a wick makes a difference. So if you've got a short wick, it gives you a smaller flame. So you basically have a whole range of, it's quite bizarre, you take a medium, no matter what you do, you make tools out of it. A story I've told before, and I always like to relate it, is I did a whole exhibition in Iowa, in the United States. And I did, they wanted me to do performative smoke drawings there, and they bought me a pile of candles. And the Americans, being health conscious the way they are, have smoke-free candles. Yes, say no more. They had to go down to the hardware to go and get hurricane lamps that had these really, ecologically unfriendly sooty candles. And I realized our candles are anything but ecologically friendly, but they draw the way you need them to.
Maar hoekom die besluit om met rook te verf? Waar daai idee vandaan gekom?
Well, that came from, as I said, I suppose this saying would be, necessity is the mother of invention. I'd been invited to do work for a show that was an exchange show with German artists looking at issues around HIV. I happened to be down at Grahamstown on a 6-month teaching spell down there at Rhodes, which means I didn't have access to any of my books or anything, and I was kind of isolated, and I had to produce this body of work, and I thought, what the hell can I bring to a discussion around HIV, which has been very thoroughly looked at by a number of very, very famous artists with some wonderful works. What could I bring to it? At the same time, I was teaching a second-year drawing workshop where the students had to draw with anything but traditional medium, sort of toothpaste and boot polish and the rest of it. And one of the students had come in with a candle, and she wasn't doing a very successful job of trying to smoke something. And in those days, I used to be quite a keen runner. I was doing sort of marathons and things. One of my running routes took me past an HIV support centre. And I'd gone back and thought, I wonder if I can, you take the candle from the student and say, look, you can draw the bloody thing, don't be so bloody lazy, which is what majority of students are waiting for, a sort of a push in the right direction. And then I think the student never took it any further. But I had to, and they didn't work. They catch fire very easily. So if you work quite slowly and sort of painfully, which I tend to be rather of a control freak, they just ignite. And because I had to produce this body of work, and because it was going to be seen as an international exchange show, so there was pressure, I had to make it work. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have persevered. Because they came out lousy and they were wrong and they all looked the same and I was irritated. And again, so pressure, deadline, adrenaline. Comes back to the same thing. Unfortunately, if I don't have a threat component, I'm a lazy git. Yes.
Wel, jy het dit verder gevat en jy het ook die rooktegniek op glas gedoen.
Yes. I've moved from paper. I still work with smoke on paper. I did a project a number of years ago. It was the feeskunstenaar in Ibos, Nelspruit. And the space that I did a body of work for was an old abandoned abattoir on the Halls estate. Just this little farm abattoir. And I wanted to make the space freak me out. It reminded me of sort of, I don't know, it's a slaughterhouse, it's a concentration camp. It reminded me a little bit of Auschwitz, one of those spaces. All you could think about was the lives that had died in that space. And I wanted to produce smoke drawings. But smoke drawings on those old patinaed walls would have looked pretentious. Clean white paper would have been an invasion of the space. And experimented working on glass. And then once the smoke adheres to glass incredibly well. Smoke is sticky, it's carbon.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll stick to your roof or your chimney or whatever it is. You just double laminate it between a second sheet of glass. So they hung in that space without any frame. So people who came into the abattoir were already slightly settled, and settled because it's an abattoir space. And then the ghosts of these little animals it was very effective for that reason. And I've continued working with glass where necessary for a project. It's not a medium that's my sole medium, certainly not. I produced a large work, No Country for Old Women. Again, it was for one of the festivals. It was Kaka on Ka. I was feeskunstenaar down at Kaka on Ka, and I produced a large altar, almost an altar to the slaughter of women in this country. This is no country for old women. Not at all. It's horrific. The violence, gender-based violence here is horrific. But it allowed me to work on shaped glass and literally produce a stained glass window altarpiece, an altar to the slaughter of women. At the moment, I'm experimenting partly for the small show at the gallery. It's coming up, working on shattered glass. So doing the drawings, working on shatterproof, and then impacting them. The way lives are impacted, the way everyone's been looking in the news in the last couple of weeks, the unease and the tension and the broken glass windows that are coming in our society.
Ja. Jy gaan altyd terug na teken en na etswerk ook. Want dit bly steeds vir jou 'n baie belangrike medium om mee te werk.
Etching and drawing are really the same thing. For me, etching is drawing. It's just drawing on another surface. Because it's the most immediate thing, it's what I've done since I can remember, is you take an object in your hand and it makes a mark. And the mark is a language. It's a far more effective language for me than speaking. Words are clumsy and awkward. But drawing is mark making, is communicating. And I think although I'll experiment in other media, it always comes back to me taking that medium and trying to draw with it. Whether it's ash or smoke or rust or water stains, it's just the way I'm wired, hot-wired. In fact, I often think that because I'm trained as an etcher, so I'm, again, a bit of a control freak. I like, working with a sewing needle and getting, tiny little 0.2 line hairlines next to each other, that I look for media that are difficult to control. So it forces me to loosen up. Because, as I said earlier, you can't work slowly and carefully in a candle. You slow down and it punishes you by catching fire and falling on your head. So it's almost a subconscious thing, I think, of searching for media that try and get me to loosen up, because my natural tendency is to tighten down and move towards almost an illustrated surface, which I try and fight against.